Hello, everybody. This is Richard McCabe, Curator of Photography at the Ogden Museum here. Edition of the Ogden Museum's online programming. Today I'll be speaking with Lee Deigaard, one of the 45 photographers in the Revelations Recent Photography Acquisitions exhibition. Lee is a photographer who lives here in New Orleans. She graduated from the University of Michigan, the Art and Design Department, the master's degree, and she also has a master's degree from the University of Texas in creative writing. In 2012, Lee won the Clarence John Laughlin Award that's given out by the New Orleans Photo Alliance. And in 2014, Lee had a solo exhibition at the Ogden Museum titled Trespass, where she exhibited her Unbidden series, excuse me. So, hey Lee, how you doing?
Hey, Richard. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to talking about the Unbidden series, which we love very much here at the Ogden and is on view now in the Revelations exhibition. And, you know, Unbidden explores, which all your art explores, the complicated relationship between humans and animals. And what I'm really interested in this series, you know, when I look at art these days, I kind of look at art through the lens or the context of our new normal, present day, pandemic. And when I look at this work, I think about one of the key elements of this work, which I love what you did is in this series, you repurposed a camera that hunters use to track animals. You repurposed this camera as a tool for art making. And I was wondering if you'd like to speak to that a little bit and the way that in today's world, we're doing a lot of repurposing, whether it's making masks for ourselves to go out in public or hand sanitizer. But I just love that part of your creative process to where you, your imagination and be able to repurpose this instrument to hunt animals and to shoot animals that hunters do, but you use it to shoot animals to make art with.
Yes, I'm a big believer in what do I have, what can I make with what I have, definitely. And I found that my best thinking often happens when I'm just, you know, not under duress, under that sort of noodling around frame of mind, which apart from pandemic stress, can sometimes arise out of, you know, something that feels like an unstimulating day otherwise. I was thinking of things like that I'd made recently, such as a piece that showed in the Tulane's Carroll Gallery in a show called Indoor Garden that was curated by Laura Richens last fall. And this was a piece I made without ever leaving the house. I was peeping at deer through windows, and what the piece became almost a painterly huge photograph. I put it on vinyl, 10 feet by 10 feet. And what I was thinking about, so I was photographing through a window with a zoom lens. Then I was like trying to remember what I photographed and photographing it with a cell phone from the LCD camera. And then, you know, it was all these lenses. It was like window panes, eyeballs, lenses. And it had to do with peeping at animals outside of their threshold of response. So for animals, the threshold of response is when you've approached too closely, and it changes what they're doing, what their behaviors are. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if people are always trying to, say, take photographs of animals, it hinders their ability to forage and other things like that. So it was, the idea played into what I was able to do, which was look out the window. Other things I, you know, did that came from unlikely places include a series called Encephalograms, which imagined some benevolent machine that could take photographs of our ephemeral emotional states. And that one came about because I was walking a dog at night under sodium halogen lights and tree limbs, and I began thinking about the brain. Photogenic drawings, these are both somewhat old series, but they apply to how I'm thinking now. That one, again, I don't really have a proper dedicated studio much of the time, so I'm working wherever I find myself. And photogenic drawings was made on the kitchen counter because I noticed that the overhead lights were casting interesting double shadows And I'd
Right.
also left a drawing slung over to the side that became a subject in a photograph.
I mean, I think that's just so interesting about your art. I mean, you can draw like an angel, you can paint, you do video work, you do installation, and photography is just another tool in your repertoire, in your artist practice. And when I showed this work, I had one photographer say, "Oh, I don't think, I don't understand why you're showing that work because it's like, that's what hunters use, that camera." And I was like, exactly. That's why I want to show it, because it's just an inventive way to use photography. And I guess just to speak to the way that photography is you just move from media to medium in your practice. And I just think that's so fascinating. And I was wondering if you wanted to speak into how maybe photography informs your other
Yeah.
practices like painting and sculpture.
Yeah, I realized I didn't answer your last question. I'll say a little bit about the nocturnal series again. It was something that it came about by seeing the images that hunters were taking and being captivated by the gaze, and then wanting to working among animals in Georgia that were in a heavily hunted area, but on a piece of land where there was no hunting, and trying to think about this hunter-gatherer kind of photography dualism, and how to see these animals as individuals, but also how their gaze kind of looks through you. It sort of x-rays us in ways that I really related to. I definitely, I take a lot of photographs. I definitely don't necessarily have a great deal of reverent technique in how I photograph. Although I'm a great appreciator of such, and I have worked with things like large format cameras. But photography is a constant tool for me. It is practically as common as breathing. It supplies me a research database for when I have incidentally witnessing certain animal behaviors, and it helps me sort of document and note. It functions as a visual journal of things I've encountered and want to remember, and it also functions as my art. Sometimes the cruder tool is what works better with animals. A nice camera with a big long lens that's stuck up covering my face. The horses did not like that. They want to be able to see your eyes. So something like a camera phone without a shutter click, where you could use it as an extension of your body. I suddenly saw that as a very useful tool where I could work quietly, where I could work kind of secondary to caretaking, like, walking a dog or spending time with a horse, where I'm not asking them to do anything, but I have a tool in my pocket that I can work with. And it depends on, it really kind of depends on what's to hand that way. But yes, it's just like the photography is an extension of my imagination, mind, and body. Not all of these are gonna become something that's art, but I don't know always what will become useful. A series called Near and Far arose out of the least intentional photograph possible, and it is now a multi-year deep series involving the horse's body as landscape. And so I don't know where a thing will become, where it will come from, or necessarily where it will go. I definitely admire photographers who can work with a great deal of advanced intention, and put everything into a single plate. But I'm a sorter and a gleaner.
Well, you've been working on Unbidden since 2007. Are you still working on it, or is it wrapped up?
I haven't added to it in a few years, I'm realizing. I don't know that I've conclusively called it wrapped up. I should probably consider doing that more often.
Well, it's ongoing, I guess.
I have these parallel deep investigations that go next to each other for years, and they kind of cross ferment in useful ways. But but I think maybe declaring endings could be a, closing chapters. That might be something to look at.
Well, great. Well, Lee, thank you so much for talking to us today about the Unbidden series. And like I said, Lee is one of the 45 photographers in the Revelations Recent Photography Acquisitions exhibition. And hopefully we will be able to get back in the gallery soon and see him in person. But Lee had a solo show at the Ogden in 2014, and this piece was donated after her show. And we really appreciate your support of the museum, Lee, and we always love seeing what you're doing. And I must add that Lee is the only artist I think that had work on 3 different separate floors of the Ogden at one time. I think that was in 2014. So she holds the record of being on 3 floors at one time. So thanks so much, Lee, and thank everybody for joining us. And please consider supporting the Ogden Museum.
Thank you so much, Richard, for everything that you do. You're so generous with artists and have given so much opportunity to so many. And the Ogden Museum has been such an amazing, amazing welcoming home. I've felt really grateful to be a part of it.
Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Bye.